Hello, my name is Max. Today, I will be doing a second video where I respond to comments from my previous content, specifically the videos from my series on Asperger's syndrome. The first video I did involved me addressing a bunch of criticism, specifically surrounding stuff like the legitimacy of Asperger's as a diagnosis, and whether or not I was using the diagnosis as an excuse for bad behavior. Since then, it seems that I've received very few criticisms. Now granted, I might have missed some relevant criticisms or other comments while scanning through the 10,000 you have already left me. If that is the case, I encourage people to leave those criticisms in the comments below this video so I may address them in a future installment. Today, I'll be addressing people's comments for the most part, although I do have a few criticisms as well. If you guys like it when I do these types of videos where I respond to your comments directly, let me know by hitting that like button and leaving a comment. With that out of the way, let's get on with things. Jamie Ogas says, at 48 years old, would it make any sense to get an AS diagnosis? May have helped 25 to 30 years ago. I think I'm past the point in my life where any assistance could have helped. Well, I suppose it depends on how well you are functioning. The main reason I think one should get a diagnosis is so you can get the institutional support you need. If you are currently employed or educated and Asperger's is not holding you back, then maybe you don't need a diagnosis. However, if you're looking to advance your career or your schooling, it would be definitely worthwhile to get a diagnosis in my opinion. In regards to schooling, you can get extensions on your work, you can do assignments and exams on your own, you might be eligible for certain financial grants, etc. And in regards to work, you can get training for jobs ideal for people with AS. If you need to leave your work on account of an emotional breakdown, your boss would be more inclined to let you. Hell, even if your boss is heartless, they would still be likely to let you leave out of fear that if they didn't, you might sue for discrimination or something. Hopefully it would never get to that point, obviously. But you know what I mean. Outside of that, maybe you don't need a diagnosis. It really depends on the individual's current situation. See, I would need to know more about what you're going through at the moment, Jamie, so I can provide a more educated opinion. Mark Wallach asks, could you make a video on your experiences with AS and using drugs? I'd like to see your take on that, as I've discussed it with fellow Aspies and have gotten somewhat similar answers. Okay, what do you mean by drugs though? Like recreational drugs or psychotherapeutic drugs? See, I've never done recreational drugs, but I suppose, unless you count alcohol, but I suppose I could do a video on how my physiology reacted to certain drugs that were prescribed to me by various psychiatrists. I don't know, to everybody watching this video, let me know if you would like me to do a video on this subject. I will definitely consider it. I'm just gonna call this guy Sed. Sed8897 asks, smoking weed cured my Asperger's. It wasn't instant by no means. It was a self-revelation that took years for me to understand and correct my behaviors. Not everyone can take the same path through smoking, or ingesting THC does help you cope with things mentally. It helps you understand yourself and your problems. At least that's how I use it. I understand there are people who think smoking weed will probably kill them, but this just isn't the case. Well, I agree with that last part. Okay, first of all, there's no such thing as curing Asperger's, but granted, I don't think that is what you meant, Said. I think what you meant to say was that smoking weed helped make your symptoms go away, to the point where it almost felt like you were cured. Either way, I remain skeptical. While marijuana might alleviate the severity of some symptoms, like anxiety and your sensitivity to certain environmental factors, I have a hard time believing that just smoking weed will make the syndrome more or less disappear. For example, I don't think smoking weed will help you read other people's body language better, make you less logically minded, make you suddenly know how to socialize like a pro, like that sort of thing. Now, maybe your brand of AS, depending on where you are on the spectrum, maybe your brand involves symptoms that can solely be addressed by some form of marijuana usage. Or maybe you were misdiagnosed and you actually have some form of general anxiety disorder or depression. Either way, like you said, it might not be right for everybody, and it's certainly not legal everywhere yet. To all my listeners, I'd advise you consult a medical professional about this sort of thing rather than rely entirely on my personal opinion. When it comes to weed, I'm a complete dummy. Fiona H writes, hi, I really like a guy at my university and I think he might have Asperger's too. It's quite obvious that he also likes me, even though he tries really hard not to show that he likes me. How could I show him that I like him? I've got his mobile number so I could text him, but I'm not sure what I could write. Do you guys have any tips for me? Okay, I'll make this really simple for you, Fiona. People with Asperger's are more logically minded than the average person, right? They like being straightforward and to the point. Do him that same courtesy. Just get your phone and tell him, honey, I want your and me now. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that. But seriously, if I were this guy you like, just be straightforward and honest. If you're friends, the worst thing he can say is, I'm not interested. And he'll do it in a kind way, right? Just say, I really like you, I find you fascinating, and I want to hang out with you more. What do you think? And that's it. See, the great thing about having AS or going after somebody with AS is you don't have to do a verbal gymnastics routine in order to woo them. This whole proposal can be over in 10 seconds. You just need to get like Nike and just do it. And then after you do that, you can maybe do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. Alright, just a bit of context for this next comment. It comes from my 4th Asperger's video on intimate relationships, and it is a response to my stories about personal sexual harassment. Click Decision says, I'd have traded places with him for F's sake. Lol. There are men who would kill for attention like that. That attention alone is proof that you have physical worth to other girls. If you were ugly, this wouldn't happen. Period. So when considering the flip side to this abuse is to feel rejected, lonely, and a lack of self-worth, then please abuse me, lol. And that comment got 3 likes. Awesome. Listen, Click Decision. Sexual conduct is not something everybody is willing to engage with indiscriminately. Everybody is different, and depending on the person, they are more or less likely to let you into their personal space. If you are not cautious and respectful of that, you risk violating the integrity of one's physical and mental personhood, which can result in trauma. Put yourself in my shoes as a 15-year-old who grew up embracing the moral tenets of Christianity and sexual purity. Add on top of that the fact that I have AS, which makes me more sensitive than the average person, physically and mentally. Because girls did what they did to me on a regular basis, it severely impaired my ability to engage with the opposite sex, in some cases even to this day. It impacted my performance at school, and a bunch of other things that I prefer not to discuss on this channel. While you might not have minded, I minded. Please consider also that while you might not mind women treating you like that, and that's fine, keep in mind that you might be emboldening women to do that to people like me who do mind. Being openly sexual like that is fine, but make sure you're being open with people who share your openness and respect that other people might not be as open. Cultivated Rose writes, do you think that AS and ADHD can be experienced similarly when it comes to sensory overload? Well, I'm not a medical expert, but from my understanding, yes, they can be. Though ADHD and AS are not the same because ADHD is one neurodevelopmental condition and AS is a range of them, there is significant overlap in their symptoms. Both involve sensory processing, and in both cases, your senses can be prone to information overload. So yes, generally speaking, they can be experienced similarly, but there are still significant differences, particularly regarding how sensory overload comes about. Emperor Palpitoad writes, Max Darrett, can you tell me how you were able to get a girlfriend? A lot of people have asked me this question, but I just happened to select Emperor Palpitoad's comment about it because, you know, his screen name is so BA. Well, before I explain, I'll just let you guys know that I'm newly single, so please let all the single Asperger's having babes on YouTube know that I'm back on the market. In particular, let them know that once they go yellow, they'll never be more mellow. Anyways, I met my ex on a website called 7cups.com, and in case you guys don't know, 7 Cups is a website where you can talk about your problems to random strangers, some of whom are psychology students who do their internships there. My ex was one such person. I guess whatever I said during our first meeting intrigued her, so she offered to talk to me on Skype, and the rest is history. I know people ask me about how I got a girlfriend because it's especially difficult for people with AS to secure a partner. My advice, if you have AS, it's much easier for somebody to see your qualities through a virtual space at first, because then they're not focused on superficialities like your body language or your ability to look somebody in the eye. For those reasons and more, I recommend talking to people online if you're looking to make a good first impression. It's worked for me. Dave Cameron, I'm assuming you have no relation to the former British Prime Minister. Hey Max, I wanted to send you a private message but couldn't figure out how. I'm curious if you have any procedures for making these videos, specifically regarding content organization. I was diagnosed with AS nearly 10 years ago at 28 and recently have been wanting to make videos discussing many of my findings, similar to how you've done here. My difficulty is this. I can't seem to organize all the info I want to discuss. I know what it is I want to communicate, but when I try to record it, my mind goes haywire. What should be said first so people understand what comes next, what's necessary, and what can be saved for a later video, in what order should I organize my points, and on and on and on. Is this something you've dealt with, and if so, how did you get past it? Also, thanks for discussing this stuff. It's helpful for me to hear it, and I know it's helpful to others. Well, first of all, thank you very much for your kind words, Dave. I know exactly what you're talking about. I had the exact same issue for many years. Unfortunately, it's a problem that only goes away after multiple attempts at improvement. One tip I can offer you that has always helped me is one that I think Hemingway used for his own writing. Start with a sentence. Ask yourself if the sentence you write is the truest, most insightful way you can write the sentence. Then do that for the paragraph. Then do that for the paragraphs that make up the introduction. Then apply that to the rest of the video. What I'm basically saying is that you have to edit. To be honest, I think the reason why my videos on AS have been so popular, and this dovetails into your question about my personal procedure, is that I find myself constantly editing various parts of my script. I can edit an entire paragraph anywhere between 5 and 10 times per video on the subject. The reason why I am so adamant about doing this is because I'm dealing with a really touchy and difficult issue, and I don't want to say anything which might be misleading or what might not be entirely truthful or what might give trolls ammunition, and so on and so on. If you decide to do videos on AS, by the way, please send me your first script so I can offer you some pointers. You can send it to my email address, which is maxdarrett@yahoo.ca. I would take more time to offer you advice, but I unfortunately have to move on. Rick Y writes, "Hey Max, I know this is an unrelated topic to the video, but I'm trying to be tested for Asperger's. I do have all the traits I've seen, although sometimes I get sarcasm. Not a lot, but sometimes then I looked up on it, and it pretty much says Asperger's never gets sarcasm. I was puzzled, so I'm wondering if from your perspective, do you ever get sarcasm? Should I still be tested?" Yes, Rick Y, you should still try to get a diagnosis. By the way, sorry that it has taken this long to respond to your comment, but unfortunately, yours got lost at a time when I was receiving hundreds of comments a day. Hopefully this will make up for it. But anyways, yes, get a diagnosis. Just because you don't have one common symptom of AS doesn't mean you don't have the syndrome. For instance, I managed to get sarcasm too, even though I feel for whatever reason compelled to respond to sarcasm as if it's being spoken literally. It's a weird thing. But yeah, think of AS like any other physiological disorder. Let's say anorexia. A symptom of anorexia involves hair growth on your body as a way to keep your body warm. If you don't have the symptom, does that mean you don't have anorexia? A symptom is a symptom. You don't have to have all the symptoms to have the syndrome. You just have to have a significant amount of them. Barbara Bush writes, "As a business owner, I can tell you that I do not care about why you behave a certain way. It is quite literally irrelevant. All I care about is how you behave, and as Max said in this video, if you're difficult to work with, I can and will hire one of the many people who will do your job without causing me strife. If you want assistance, that is something you have to pay for or get the state to pay for. If I am paying you, I don't have a responsibility to accept poor performance from you for any excuse other than I think the value you bring to my business makes it worthwhile. And Max, we are not trying to covertly get rid of you because we feel guilty. We are trying to covertly get rid of you to avoid draconian anti-discrimination laws. I don't feel guilty about getting rid of people that are weighing my business down. Why should I?" Okay, let's go through this chronologically. First of all, I am fully aware that employers don't need to care and shouldn't need to care, and that you can hire somebody who doesn't cause you quote-unquote strife. Though this might cause some people to take issue with me, I actually agree with Barbara regarding this. The question is, though, what does one do if somebody has a mental disorder that weighs them down? You say we should pay for assistance, but what if one is lacking in money? You say we should get the government to help us, but what if they require a diagnosis? And depending on where you live, a diagnosis could cost more money than one has. I suppose one path forward is to educate the wider populace about how beneficial somebody with AS can be to a company if they have the right job. In my case, I had several jobs where I underperformed, and a couple of jobs where I did well if I pushed myself to my limits. Now that I currently have an ideal job, I'm actually doing more work than most of the employees according to my employers. I'm not just tooting my own horn. Maybe I should do a future video where I try to change the narrative regarding having employees who are on the spectrum. Let me know what you guys think. And finally, Max Aussie writes, "It's subjective. You can beat and control anything in your mind. Don't listen to the doctors when they say you have something like this. AS, ADD, ADHD, even depression and bipolar is just a state of mind. Start by telling yourself a better story. It's all about controlling your own thoughts and directing your mind the way you want to be. I'm not saying these people aren't different, but there is nothing wrong with them. 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with ADD. My parents asked the docs to explain it. The only thing they could say was a chemical imbalance. They just wanted to make the noisy kid into a quiet kid. My parents laughed and said, 'We are not going to drug our son for something that you, the experts, don't even understand. Don't blindly trust what the doctors or the system says.'" Well, yeah, you should never just blindly trust what doctors say. That's why second opinions are so frequent. Anyways, this is another example of a commenter taking their own personal experience and universalizing it. While I have no doubt that you are speaking truthfully and that ADD is often misdiagnosed, you're simplifying the issue. While there is comorbidity in the symptoms, ADD and autism are not the same thing. For instance, they are not treated in the same way medically. You can try to correct the chemical imbalance that comes along with having ADD with prescription drugs, for example, and depending on how one reacts to these drugs, one can function indistinguishably from a normal human. With autism, there is no chemical imbalance to correct. Autism has to do with the way one's brain is wired. No drug can correct that. One can take certain drugs to cope with the symptoms of autism, but there is no medicine to cure it. Look, I've tried to tell myself for the longest time that I could, as you say, beat and control anything in my mind. I desperately wished that your perspective was the correct one. I sought out all possible resources to try and fix myself, and I was fighting a losing battle. Autism isn't something that comes about due to a poor upbringing that conditions one's mind into believing they have these problems. It has to do with the way our physiology evolved since conception. Do you really believe that it's impossible, based on our knowledge of evolution, that the brain cannot develop differently in some cases? While I agree that one can work in conjunction with having autism and take control of one's life while not being subservient to the symptoms, it's not something that just goes away by having a better attitude. To conclude, I'll recommend that you and anybody else that's interested read a book called ADHD Does Not Exist by Richard Saul. It's a book that addresses a lot of the common misconceptions people have about mental illness and autism, including your own, Max Aussie. I highly recommend you pick it up if and when you have the chance. Anyways, that's all the comments I selected for today. Make sure to leave your thoughts down below if you think I could have done better in replying, or if you have any extra questions you'd like addressed in the future. Stay tuned for an upcoming video where I detail some exciting stuff coming to the channel in the very near future. Until next time, just remember, you deserve to be happy.